Welcome to the January Office Add-ins community call, everyone. I hope you had a good new year, and we're excited to kick off this year. So today's community call in our agenda, we have a demo for deploying an Office add-in using SSO, ask for feedback for WXP, so Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and a presentation on prependOnSend for Outlook. So on the agenda today for our presenters will be David Chesnut, who's a senior technical writer at Microsoft, Wang, who's a principal product manager at Microsoft, and Yashvardhan Joshi, who's also a senior product manager at Microsoft. David, if you wanted to take over.
Thanks, Preethika. Hi, everyone. My name is David Chesnut. I'm a senior technical writer on the Office platform team. Today, I'm going to do a demo of how you can deploy an Office add-in that uses SSO to Azure. This is a question that's come up a few times, like on the GitHub issues. I've seen folks struggling with it. And so last month in December, I decided to write an article to tackle this subject that hopefully is going to help people. So I'm just going to do a demo. So let me share my desktop here. So this is the article that's put together on how you can deploy to a Microsoft Azure App Service. This is still in review right now. So if you go looking for this, it's not published. I'm hoping to get this published by the end of this week. Fun thing that happened, all the steps in this article were working fine for the last couple of weeks. And I was testing Linux deployments, Windows deployments, TypeScript, JavaScript. It was all good. And then Monday of this week, it just suddenly stopped working. And it took me until about 30 minutes before this demo. I think I figured out what the problem was, and it's fixed. So this is going to be one of those fun demos where I'm really hoping it works when I get to the end of these steps. I'm basically going to walk through this article and talk about what you need to do. And just to be clear, the focus of this article is really on what you need to do to the Office add-in to deploy it. It's not so much about how do you deploy in Azure, because there's tons of resources out there in Azure, and there's tons of ways to deploy. There's continuous integration, either through Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions. You can set up deployment slots for staging and live. So this article is really about what's just a simple path to deploy it, so you can understand like what parts of your Office add-in need to be adjusted if you're going to an Azure App Service. And the first thing to point out here is that we do have an existing article on how to deploy a static HTML to a storage account on Azure. This works for, I believe, all of the Office templates. It doesn't work with SSO. And the reason for that is because SSO requires you to run server-side code. So for that, you have to use an Azure App Service, and that's why this is a little different. So let's go ahead and through this. Now, as a prerequisite, this is based on the Office template. So we'll get started with running Office, and we're going to build just a simple little SSO add-in. And the thing you want to be sure of first is that it's working on localhost before you deploy it, because you don't want to deal with both deployment and trying to debug stuff at the same time. So we'll get that going. And then once this is created, I'll walk you through how you create the service app itself. All right, so in my Office, I'm going to pick the SSO option. We can just use JavaScript, that's fine. Let's give it a name. We'll run it on Excel. So I'll call DavCH Contoso SSO test. Then it'll go run its npm install all the pieces. One thing I'll mention while it's doing that is the latter half of this article is about how you modify the project itself. And some of these changes, I want to be looking at putting a PR to the template itself, because I think we can simplify some of this. And then hopefully that'll remove some of these steps, so you don't have to do quite so much to update your project and deploy it. I forgot that for some reason when Teams is running, I think it takes a fair amount of CPU power, because I notice other stuff runs a little slower. And speaking of npm install, while this is running, there's kind of an interesting decision you have to make. Like when you deploy, do you want to run npm install in the Azure App Service, or do you want to just upload the node modules folder from localhost? I'm not sure if anyone has a preference on that. I do know that if you go and set up continuous integration in various paths, there are mechanisms to deal with that. In this article, I just run the npm install on the server, but you can always change that. So let's open up our project. The next thing we're going to need to do is configure it to use SSO. I guess it's hiding over here. There we go. So let's open up the terminal. Run our configure SSO. This is going to create an app registration for SSO. And you can choose if you want to put that app registration on the tenant you're using for deployment, or if you want to put it into the tenant where it's getting consumed, where like I might be running Excel. Now what it should be doing is popping up a window. Oh, here we go. I was going to say, needs to authenticate. So I'm going to deploy it to my tenant where I'm going to use it. So I'll log into that account. Okay. Signed in. So now it should be off and running. It's going to be updating the project. And so actually, while it's doing this, we can jump ahead. You're going to need this Azure extension installed in Visual Studio Code. And then you can connect your tenant. I have a Visual Studio MSDN subscription. And I'm going to connect, and then you have app services up there, and I already have a few because I've been testing. So what I'm going to do is create a new app service, and these are the steps over here, by the way. You can do, there's steps if you want to deploy to Windows, steps if you want to deploy to Linux. I'm going to use Windows because for some reason I found that's a little faster, at least for my scenario. So I'm going to select, I'm going to right click on app services, say create new web app advanced, and then give it a name. Call this one web, just so I can remember this is the web server part of it. You need to pick a resource. You can create a new one if you don't have one. I've got one set up here. Right now, the SSO template is using Node 16, so don't go to Node 18 just yet. It lags behind, I don't know, maybe a month or two, and then there's testing down into updates. So I'm going to pick 16. I'm going to pick Windows as my OS. And then I'm going to pick my region. I'm on the West US, so we'll do that. And then pick one of your service plans. I'm going to go ahead and use this paid service plan I have. You can also use like a free one if you want, or you can create one here. Paid one tends to be a little more performant. All right, so it's off creating the web app. Let's go back to here. Okay, we got our project configured. So the next step is to start configuring our project, I believe. So we're going to want to update the manifest. So if you open up your manifest and take a look, like this is, right, everything in here is going to be localhost. And we need to change that to our actual server URL. So let's go get that while still creating it. I'll give it a sec just to finish that. But the easy way to update that, you can set up a deployment option in the Webpack config that comes with this template. It will look for localhost and replace it for you. But you do need to change it a little bit. You just want the domain. Then I'll go put the website URL here. Should be done by now. Yep, there it is. So I'm going to open it, right click on it and open it in the portal. And this account is my web server account. So now I'm looking at my web app. This is the app service, which I try to keep this distinct. It's not the app registration because that's more about SSO. This is about running the website. So I'm going to copy this URL to the website, and I'm going to go back and put that in here. You want to make sure you update this anywhere it shows up in your project. So like it's also in, if I go down to my source, helpers, there's this fallback auth dialog, JS, and there's a spot here where it's using that name. And I didn't mean to double copy that. There we go. Okay, so let's make sure we didn't miss anything. So that should take care of our manifest. And we also need to take care of our package JSON. There's a couple of changes we need to make. There's some helper commands I put in here that you can run. The command line to update the start. And you also want to delete this pre-start script because when you deploy to Azure, it'll run that pre-start and well, actually, let me show you why. I should point this out. If you go to the package JSON, this start is trying to run this Office add-in debugging package, and that's basically attempts to launch Excel, which isn't going to work on your server. So instead, this has to become node middle tier.js. So you just start the node server. And then the other thing is you want to get rid of this pre-start because it'll try to run a build, and we're going to have the build already done. So we don't need to run a build. So we take that out. That's what those two commands do. And then let's make sure we save these changes. We need one more update to Webpack, which is we want to make sure we copy our package JSON over to our distribution so that when we deploy, it'll run the npm install on the server side. So I'm going to put that in down here near the bottom, this copy Webpack plugin part. And we already updated the fallback auth. Need to update our env, so it's production. So I'm going to go to this .env file, switch this to production. Save that. And we're going to update our app.js. Now, the reason we're going to update that is because it is using a package that's not going to work. Let's see, this is middle tier app.js. It will want to use this Office add-in dev certs to create an SSL self-signed certificate, but you don't want to do that on the server side or on Azure. You'll have one already. And this will fail if it tries to run because it tries to look for a Windows, I forget what it's called. It's like a Windows storage for certificates or something. So to make it easy, I just copy, paste, replace it. Now, this is where I found out the bug was. So I'm going to copy from this other project because I know this one works. And I will need to go update the article so it has this correct code. So I'm just going to copy this over and save. And I believe that's all we need to do on this. So I'm going to run the build. And that's going to create a distribution folder up here. Basically, it's running Webpack. It's going to copy all the files into a dist folder. And the dist folder is what I'm going to deploy up to my web server. Now, while that's going, open up another portal to Azure. Now, this is the tenant that's going to consume it. It has my app registration at the moment because I need to update this as well. So if I go to my app registrations and sort by date, because I have way too many of these, there's my Contoso SSO test. This is the one that the npm configure command ran, and it created this for me. But if you look at like your redirect URIs, you'll see these still say localhost 3000. So these need to be updated as well. You might want to create multiple app registrations. Like when you're testing locally, you might want this one, and you could create a copy of this and then have another one that's using your server or a staging server or whatever. For simplicity, I'm just going to edit this one. So we just need to go get that URL. Copy that. Now this build's done, so let's get this going because this might take a moment. So I'm going to right-click my dist folder because I want to deploy it. I'm going to say deploy to web app. I'm going to pick the one that we just created, Contoso test SSO web. Say, yep, go ahead and deploy it because it's going to overwrite what's up there. And I'm going to say, yeah, we can default to that in the future. So if I keep deploying, if I make updates to this dist folder, I can keep uploading it. So here we can see it's doing its deployment. So it's packaging everything up and setting up to the server, and then it'll start node for us. While it's doing that, I'm going to go back to the app registration. Just over here, so we can make sure we update this. Save it. Now, you don't need to update this task pane one. I'm not sure why the template creates it. I think that used to be the name or something. So I mean, you can change it if you want. I just leave it alone. And then if you go down to expose an API, you have this application ID URI, so this also needs to be updated with that domain so that your SSO is going to work correctly. All right, so that should take care of that. Now let's go back and check the Contoso site. So we're still deploying. It says successful, but I wait till this thing stops running. But once it is running, we should be able to open up this website and just kind of test it. Like for taskpane.html. Okay, we're getting info back, so that's a good sign. Let's see, get this part to work. So I'm going to go in Excel, create a new workbook. I'm going to go ahead and just sideload this. So I'm going to go just upload the manifest from locally. And let's see here. Let's go to the demo folder. I need SSO test. But I'm not going to use this manifest. That's the localhost one. In the dist folder is the one that got built that's switched out with the correct domains. So I'm going to open that one, upload it, show task pane, Contoso SSO test. Yep. Look it, see if it works. Oh, no, I got an error. Well, this is a problem I was having earlier. I thought maybe that would work because it was. This one's working, which I did earlier. This test 9. So I'm going to have to go back and look at some code difference between these. This is the thing I was worried about. So next steps, I will update the article so that for sure it works correctly. I'll figure out why this is failing in some cases and hopefully get that published by the end of this week. And then after that, I'll be following up with the folks on the template to submit a PR to see if we can make fewer steps for deployment. So that is it. So Preethika, turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, David. That was an awesome demo. Let me just share my screen again. Just a second. All right, Yoon, do you want to discuss the feedback for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint?
Yeah. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Wang Yun, and I am the product manager for Office, especially Word and PowerPoint. Today, I will get more feedback from you through several surveys we have. We already posted 2 surveys previously in previous community calls. So your inputs are very valuable for us to determine the future investment, as well as to do better job on prioritize our work. So we do expect that we can get more feedbacks from you on these topics. So first one is the auto install and launch add-ins for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So in this survey, we are asking questions about the user scenarios, as well as how do you think about the auto open and auto launch capabilities that can benefit your add-ins for WXP. And also earlier last year, we also had a survey for structured document content usage in Word add-ins. It actually talked about how do you want to leverage content controls and fields to complete your add-in work for structured document. And actually, the previous survey results helped us a lot to invest in the content control and fields related features, and some of those will come up pretty soon as preview in the first half of this year. And we continue looking forward to more feedbacks from you so that we can continue investing in these areas. And today we have a new survey. We want to learn about your scenarios, your use cases about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and that will also benefit our future investment strategy shaping, etc. So please go into this link or just scan the QR code on the page so that you can get more details for the survey content. So that's all for my content today. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Yoon. Yashvardhan, did you want to take over for Prepend OnSend?
Thanks, Preethika. Hi, everyone. My name is Yash. I work as a product manager in the Outlook extensibility team. We recently have been trying to roll out a new JS API. Let me talk about the feature prependOnSend. Late last year, we launched a set of APIs called prependOnSend. And essentially what they let you do on Outlook was add content to the end of the email or event. So after we received really good feedback on prependOnSend, the next request that we received were essentially to build prependOnSend APIs for Outlook Office.js. And prependOnSend can mainly be used for inserting disclaimers or other content that you'd wish to add at the beginning of email or events, right when they're sent out. This content can be plain text as well as HTML. It would work cross-platform. So that's Win32, OVA, that's Outlook for browser, and then Mac and mobile. This supports inline images, and if you've already incorporated prependOnSend changes, then you essentially don't even need changes in your manifest. These are a few instances where you can use it. It could probably be a confidentiality notice that you want to send out, an opinion disclaimer, or maybe even a company header that you want to include in the beginning of emails. This is what the API looks like. You can find it at office context mailbox.item.body prependOnSendAsync. If you want to use HTML, then the cohesion type can be context cohesion type.html, or as the example shows below, if you want to use plain text, then the cohesion type can be text. This is the sample code, just a couple of lines to essentially also show if there are errors or to log if the action is completed. I'll run you guys through a quick demo to show what it looks like. API parameters include the data string that you want to append. There are optional fields like the cohesion type and async context. And we are also looking at a couple of error scenarios here that I've mentioned. The limitation is 5,000 characters, so that turns up in the error, or if there is an invalid format, and that's also something that shows up. The manifest changes are a little tricky. This is a tough call, but essentially what we are going to do is the extended permissions that we used for prependOnSend will also turn up for prependOnSend. So in the extended permissions section, you'd have to mention prependOnSend in your manifest, and that should get prependOnSend and prependOnSend working for both. The manifest changes, maybe I'll show you how it quickly looks like. This is how the end product would look like. I could run a demo video for you. So here's the manifest, and as I had earlier mentioned, I'm not sure if it's visible or not, but the extended permissions section now has prependOnSend, and that's enough for the prependOnSend to work as well. Okay, so here what we're essentially trying to do is on the console, we will paste the messages, the code that I had actually shown in an earlier slide. This is for HTML. And what happens here is, as it shows, it's clearly mentioned cohesion type is HTML. And once we run this, the console says the text has been prepended. And now when we send the email, you should be able to see the appended text. It's very similar for plain text as well. So you can build your add-in out to either include HTML or plain text, and it will turn up as a prepended text to your email. The same works for events as well. So there's no difference in code for email or event. So the plain text shows, and the same we can do for HTML. Yeah, that's it. I have the public documentation available with me, so I can drop that in the chat. This is currently in preview on Win32, and we expect to be done with the Mac and Outlook for web work done by the end of this month.
Great. Thanks for the demo, Yash. All right, so now I'm going to go into our Q&A section of the call. Starting off, our first question was for an Outlook mobile question. It was generally asking that it only supports message read mode and when compose mode and the onSend event will be supported. And they mentioned that this feature difference between the Outlook variants has been present for many years and has been a major barrier to customer adaptation of their add-in and is currently an open issue in our GitHub repo. And our answer to this is we currently do not have an exact roadmap for this feature, but it'd be great to get a few more details on your add-in and your exact necessities for it, for Compose, so we could learn more about it. So here's this link right here. Feel free to follow that and submit another feature request. And then our second question was a two-part question. First, we would like to enter our Outlook add-in into AppSource, but it is blocked because it is an onSend add-in. When will AppSource accept onSend add-ins? And then the second part of the question is, what is the roadmap regarding adding onSend functionality to phones, both iPhone and Android? The answer to this question is this is unfortunately still not allowed. We've recently shipped Smart Alerts is the relatively same functionality and is allowed in the store, so that might be a good alternative to look into. This link to the documentation here has a few more details on that, and they also wanted to note that Send Me block is still not allowed in the store as well. Third question, what is the timeline for upcoming features in PowerPoint? There's a lot in Excel that can't be done in Word or PowerPoint. The developer feedback and ideas forum doesn't get much attention. Could there be more effort in this review? This is good feedback to receive. We'll answer this more thoroughly in the blog post, but it'll be definitely something to consider moving forward for PowerPoint and Word. Lastly, is there a timeline for when Outlook Mobile on iOS and Android will support compose mode for Office add-ins, and further when the onSend event will be supported? Currently, only read mode is supported for Outlook add-ins, and this has been a state for many years, but our add-in is essentially for compliance measures to ensure all sent messages include some extra input / metadata from the sender. This is similar to the first question, and our answer to this is we've been getting questions on onSend report for mobile quite frequently now, and this feature will be looked into once we're able to finish delivering on other features that onSend would build upon. So stay tuned for more information about this. And lastly, is there an API or access point where we can call how many seats have been provisioned for an Office add-in by the 365 administrator? For example, their company has 25 seats, but only authorizes 5 for their add-in. Is there a way for the add-in developer to know that? Please note that we do not have an SAS application, just an Office Store add-in. This will also be answered in the blog post. Stay tuned for that as well. And if you are new to Office add-ins, here are a few links to get started in terms of our documentation, a few quick starts, Script Lab, where our samples repo lives, the M365 developer program, and a link to the Office scripts documentation. To further engage with our team, there's a few links here. So for technical questions, we have the Office add-ins dev questions, and then we also have Stack Overflow, and we monitor both of those. And if you find a bug in one of our features, feel free to put in an issue on our GitHub repo under office-js. And for any feature requests and ideas, feel free to go to our M365 Dev Suggestions page. You can also always send us a smile or a frown at Inside Office. And we have a few other developer community calls that you can also take a part of. So if any of these look interesting to you, feel free to also join these. They will be at a different time than the Office Add-ins community call. So you can always look into these as well. And that being said, thank you for joining today. The recording will be available in about 24 hours on our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev. And our next call will be February 8th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. There will also be a blog post that goes over all the demos today and the Q&A that you can also reference that will probably be up in about a week and a half. Thank you.